When the bodyguard's silhouette swallowed the lights above the tunnel, Lena imagined for an instant that she had drifted back into one of her half-remembered dreams, those silent territories where sound arrived before shape and where every heartbeat echoed like a drum in a cavern. She was 14, born without sight, yet rhythm painted her horizons more vividly than color ever could. Now a wall of muscle and procedural authority stood between her and the only music that had ever made the darkness feel weightless. The guard's refusal struck harder than any shove. Not authorized. Step aside. Around her, a restless sea of ticket stubs and denim jackets pressed toward the stadium gates. Voices overlapped. German, Czech, English. The ripe expectancy of 80,000 lungs drawing in the same breath of anticipation. Lena tightened her fingers on the glossy rectangle of cardboard she had won with a single radio call, as though its corners might anchor her to something solid. Somewhere beyond the barricades, Michael Jackson was warming up, his band counting silently to 4. The crowd's roar coiling like a spring. She heard it all and saw it all, the way she always did, by letting the frequencies braid themselves into a living map. Yet here, one man's shadow had turned that map into a closed door. In the moment, the guard's hand landed on her shoulder. The world shrank to the hiss of distant amplifiers and a pulse that was half hers, half the stadium's. She told herself it had to be a nightmare, until a gentle, unmistakable scent of stage talc and leather drifted over the guard's shoulder, and a soft tenor murmured, "Let me carry you." Suddenly, she was being lifted, cradled, propelled toward an uproar that split the sky. Light did not enter her eyes, but it spilled across her skin, warm as sunrise. And with it came the certainty that even in perfect darkness, some moments shine forever. The family flat on Kotlarska Street had 3 windows, all facing a tram line, none admitting much hope. Brno in 1988 smelled of coal dust, wet concrete, and onions frying in communal corridors. Yet each dawn, Lena rose before the trams rattled awake, pressing her ear to the wallpaper as though the city's machinery might whisper secrets through plaster. One April morning, a different vibration trembled under her fingertips. The bright, metallic jingle of Western pop slipping through a neighbor's contraband radio. It was the opening snap of a snare from Dirty Diana, and the sharpness of that crackle sliced straight into her chest. She followed the sound, bare feet over cold linoleum, palms trailing along chipped door frames until she reached the kitchen. Her mother, Alina, hunched over an enamel stove, stirring barley coffee. The radio perched beside a tin of rationed sugar cubes. Its announcer, buoyant with an enthusiasm rarely heard on state stations, launched a contest. Identify the song from a single bar and win 2 tickets to Michael Jackson, Munich, June 12th. Phone lines open now. Alina's first instinct was to switch it off. Foreign broadcasts could be grounds for inspection. But Lena's head tilted, the small cords in her neck taut with concentration. A single measure. Bass line, syncopated hi-hat. One clipped horn stab. Crackled through the static. "Smooth criminal," Lena whispered before the melody even unfurled. She spoke not in triumph, but in recognition, the way a child speaks her own name. Her mother's sigh was equal parts pride and dread. "Even if you win, Lasko, how would we—" Lena's answer was to lift the handset of their gray rotary phone and dial blind, fingers counting ridges. When the host picked up, Lena greeted him in careful German. "I have never seen Michael," she told a live audience, stretching from Bavaria to border towns, "but I hear him, the way most people see fireworks, burst after burst, lighting up the dark. The switchboard erupted. The host requested proof. Lena hummed the bridge, drumming the offbeat on the wooden tabletop with astonishing precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," the broadcaster crowed, "we have a winner from Czechoslovakia." The line disconnected. Silence pooled in the kitchen until Elena realized her hands were shaking. The tickets would be mailed to a relative in Vienna, the host explained in a follow-up call. Visas would, theoretically, be the family's responsibility. The very word visa felt forbidden, whispered only in queue lines and rumors. Yet Lena's victory moved like voltage through the neighborhood. The butcher tucked away a piece of veal he was saving for later. The school principal waived Lena's absence from end-term exams. An elderly neighbor slipped Alina a stack of West German marks hidden inside a hollowed Bible. Still, the real test waited at the frontier. On the first humid morning of June, they boarded an overnight train. Alina, Lena, and Jan, Lena's older brother, charged with protecting them, but nervous enough to chew through a sleeve. The carriage smelled of diesel and boiled eggs. Every wheel clack was a countdown. Lena kept her Walkman pressed to her chest, not for music, the batteries were dead, but for the comforting weight of possibility. At dawn, the train hissed to a halt near Břeclav. Uniformed silhouettes paced the corridor, collecting passports. Alina's fingers trembled as she produced the invitation letter from the Munich promoter, each stamp a fragile promise. The inspector's boots squeaked. Papers rustled. Then, unexpected, "Is this the girl from the radio?" His check carried the rough drawl of Moravia, but excitement softened the edge. Lena lifted her face. "Yes, sir," she replied in flawless cadence. The guard's posture changed. Regulations collided with something older. The memory of tapping dance shoes beneath school desks, of hearing forbidden vinyl in attic hideaways. He stamped their passports with a decisive thud. When Alina mouthed "Décroché," gratitude barely contained, the guard leaned in. "Bring her back safely," he whispered. "Let her tell us how it sounded." The train lurched forward. Lena exhaled, tasting iron in the air. Beyond the window, flat fields blurred into streaks of green and ochre. She imagined each kilometer like a groove on a record. The needle of fate, inching ever closer to that explosive first chord. For a girl who had never opened her eyes to sunrise, the world now felt wide, perilous, and unbearably bright. In Vienna, an uncle handed over the tickets with the guarded ceremony of a spy exchange. By evening, they were on a crowded coach bound for Munich, wedged between leather-jacketed students, debating politics, and Bavarian grandmothers smuggling cheese. Lena tuned them all out, focusing on the engine's rhythm, a steady 8 count, overlaying it with phantom horns, string stabs, the grunt of a singer who turned breath into percussion. Munich greeted them with neon reflections in puddles and scents of pretzels, exhaust, and June roses. The Olympic Stadium's floodlights stabbed the night like lit spears. Alina's breath quickened. Lena's pulse synchronized with the distant subs rumbling through concrete. But bureaucracy was not done with them yet. At Gate C, her mother presented both tickets and the contest certificate. A security contractor in a fluorescent vest scanned them, frowned, and summoned his superior. Somewhere inside, the opening act finished to raucous applause. "Forgery," the senior guard pronounced, not bothering to lower his voice. "This stamp is wrong color." Alina protested in halting German, waving the promoter's letter. The guard crossed his arms. Line monitors funneled impatient fans around the commotion. A chorus of mutters rose like swarm noise. Lena sensed her mother's panic before she heard the quiver in her voice. She stepped forward, shoulders straight. "Sir, the stamp may have faded in the mail, But the music hasn't. Her pronouncement drew a ripple of laughter and annoyance from nearby onlookers. The guard, unmoved, shook his head. Rules are rules. A gust carried the faint echo of a sound check, the sharp E minor chord of a guitar punching through the bowels of the stadium. The audience inside responded with a tidal roar. Lena's knees trembled, not from fear, but from proximity to the dream she had nursed in secrecy since the first contraband cassette changed her night sky. Just then, a soft male voice cut through the bustle. "What seems to be the matter?" It belonged to a lanky saxophonist from the tour's horn section, on a smoke break, instrument case slung over one shoulder. He listened, brow knitting. When Alina explained, he squatted to Lena's height. "You knew the song from one bar?" She nodded. He whistled the syncopated motif. She snapped her fingers precisely on the offbeats. His eyes widened. "Stay here," he said, and sprinted toward a backstage entrance. Hope flickered, fragile as a match in wind. A minute passed. 5. The stadium lights dimmed. The collective intake of breath from 70,000 throats rolled across the concourse. Lena's heart hammered so loudly she almost missed the distant countdown. 5, 4, 3. The guard gestured to a nearby chain-link pen. "Either move aside or go back to the street. Show's about to start." Before Alina could answer, the first explosive drum hit of "Wannabe Startin' Something" detonated inside the arena, shaking the metal under their palms. Lena's mouth fell open, tears springing unbidden, not of sorrow, but of unreachable joy, hanging just meters away. Inside, the singer was taking the stage. Outside, a blind girl pressed her ear to the night and refused to let the music begin without her. The boundary between them was only a ticket, a rule, a man unwilling to bend. Yet, somewhere beyond the barricade, a musician was sprinting through corridors, breathless with urgency, determined to tell the king of pop about a girl who could see with her ears. The song's bass line rolled on, relentless, and Lena stood poised at the cliff edge of destiny, waiting for a hand to pull her into the light. The instant the first stuttering synth brass riff of "Wannabe Startin' Something" punched through the concrete lungs of Munich's Olympia Stadion, the evening flipped from expectant to electric. Crowd noise rumbled out of the access tunnels like pressurized steam, condensing on the night air and on the rigid stance of the security contractor still blocking Lena's way. Floodlights bounced off his orange vest, turning him into a glaring beacon of refusal. Lena heard everything at once. Cymbals strafing above her head, a ripple of shrieks rolling the grandstands like wind through wheat, her mother's heartbeat fluttering inches away, and, beneath it all, the slow-burning grief of opportunity slipping past. No shape, no color, just a widening gulf that felt colder than the early summer breeze snaking around the turnstiles. "Please," Alina tried in reedy German that wilted beneath the stadium roar. "She is registered. Look at the envelope stamp." The supervisor, a square-jawed Bavarian whose day badge read H. Keller, wore the mildly irritated look of a man asked to re-explain simple arithmetic. "Counterfeit or misprint? Either way, not my problem. Step aside." He gestured toward a cordoned strip of asphalt beyond the gate where latecomers and failed scalpers were being shunted. A tremor slid down Lena's spine. The concert had begun without her. Every new bar that crashed through the walls was a door slamming shut. She reached into the dark in front of her, fingers brushing the air as though she might feel the shape of the chorus. The guard took it for defiance and set his palm against her shoulder. Gentle, perhaps, but final. That single touch carried weight. like a verdict. Inside the tunnel, the song detonated into its first chorus. The crowd's response was so loud it rattled loose flecks of concrete dust, showering the access ramp in tiny grains that glittered in the floodlights. Outside, Lena tasted the grit on her tongue and tried not to cry. Then another voice burst across the moment, raw, unamplified, startlingly close. "I'm starting with the man in the Maier." It belonged to a thick-set Welsh tourist whose cheeks were already streaked with concert eve tears. His wife nudged him, mortified, but he didn't stop. A few nearby fans laughed. A knot of Argentine backpackers whistled approval. Moments later, a teenage girl in a sequined glove picked up the harmony. Lena couldn't help herself. She inhaled, counted the unseen conductor's beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, and entered on pitch so true the little cluster turned as one. Her voice was smooth, low, threaded with the minor quiver of hope, battered by disappointment. "I'm asking him to change his ways." The improvised choir swelled. Tourists, locals, scalpers, even a hawker clutching counterfeit T-shirts let the melody thread them together. Strangers adjusted their phrasing to match Lena's unseen cues. Her sense of rhythm, flawless and unhurried, welded 30 throats into a single yearning plea. The guard's hand fell away. For the span of 2 refrains, his rigid authority dissolved, replaced by the childhood memory of a transistor radio sneaked under bed covers. He didn't smile, but the muscles around his eyes loosened. Still, procedure reasserted itself with the next gust of feedback from inside. He cleared his throat and lifted his walkie-talkie. Back to business. Lena heard the click of the transmitter, the coded sting of German syllables requesting backup. A wave of dread crept over her. She sang the final line. "Make that change," with a softness born of acceptance. Then let silence fold around her. Applause bubbled from the mini crowd, but it broke apart quickly. The spotlight of collective attention is fickle when the main show booms only meters away. Elena squeezed her daughter's hand so tightly, the bones ground together. "We tried, Milachku. I'm so sorry." Lena shook her head. "Not yet." Her voice was a thread stretched between defiance and fatigue. She focused on the backstage alleys beyond the guard's shoulder. Somewhere back there, the saxophonist. If he had reached anyone who mattered, Lena believed, things could still change. Music was built on changes. Whole symphonies turned on a single accidental note. Behind Keller, a set of mesh gates clanged. A pair of venue officials in navy blazers advanced, clipboards ready, their expressions carrying the weary certainty that they would be dealing with yet another counterfeit sob story. Alina's stomach churned. She could almost see their verdict floating ahead of them like a banner. Denied entry. But the woman in the lead barely reached the ticket inspection zone before her earpiece crackled. She paused, listened, and her eyebrows pinched upward in disbelief. She murmured into her mic, waited, then pivoted toward Keller. "He says to verify personally," she shouted over the bass thump. Her German was crisp, her confusion obvious. Keller frowned. "Who says?" She tapped the headset. "Master Harrison." The name meant nothing to most onlookers, but Keller's breath stalled. He shot a glance toward the tunnel, where a phalanx of security staff now parted for a slim, dark-suited American in his late 30s. The newcomer carried none of the swagger of rock and roll. His tailored jacket and severe crew cut screamed corporate. Yet sweat darkened the cloth under his arms, suggesting a sprint through the bowels of the stadium. David Harrison, tour road manager, troubleshooter, priest of logistics, stopped 3 paces from Lena. His gaze flicked first to Alina's anxious face, then settled on the girl. Something in her poised stillness, perhaps, made him lower his voice. "You are Lena Novakova?" "Yes, sir." No tremor, just the melody of Czech vowels knocked smooth by German consonants. He held out his hand, palm up. A silent request. Lena placed her worn ticket on it. Harrison inspected the faded stamp, the embossed seat number, the radio station's foil emblem half rubbed away by pocket friction. Then he did something the policy manual never covered. He lifted the ticket to his nose and sniffed. Not counterfeit paper. That would smell of fresh ink and cheap glue. This smelled of months in drawers, of worry and train smoke, and a young girl's sweat. Authentic in ways no hologram could prove. Keller cleared his throat, embarrassed and defensive. Harrison ignored him. "I need to borrow this," he told Lena. "You and your mother stay here." He tucked the ticket into an inner pocket and strode back toward the tunnel at a jog that looked painful in patent leather shoes. The officials followed, almost running to keep up, leaving the security captain momentarily commandless. Fans continued funneling around the standoff, some throwing sympathetic glances, others simply irritated by the obstruction. Inside, the first song ended with a percussive flourish. Fireworks streaked above the arena rim, lighting the sky white gold. The bang ricocheted across the plaza, startling pigeons into ragged flight. Lena flinched at the boom, but her chin remained high, face angled toward the gate she still could not pass. Time thickened. 3 minutes. 5. Second song. Heartbreak Hotel live arrangement. Drums heavier than on the record. Tempo pushed forward by a restless audience. Patterns of crowd noise told Lena where the singer was on stage. Center ramp, stage left, catwalk, out into the pit. She could almost trace his footsteps. Each one landed in her ears like Morse code from a distant shore. Alina's nerves frayed. She eyed the growing cluster of late arrivals stacking up behind them, all impatience and body heat. "If they arrest us," she murmured in Czech, "I will never forgive myself." "They won't," Lena answered. Whether it was faith or stubbornness, her mother couldn't tell. Then, distant but unmistakable, a staccato burp of static. The security radios lit at once. Keller pressed his receiver to one ear. His brows shot upward. His mouth fell slightly open. Without waiting for colleagues, he stepped aside and lifted the waist-high chain that formed the last physical barrier. "Please," he said, voice stripped of authority. "Follow me." Lena allowed her mother to guide her forward. Her cane, until now resting idle, tapped the threshold and a tremor passed through her. Behind the fence, the ground vibrated like the surface of a kettle about to whistle. Each drum beat rattling her bones. They were led through a dank service tunnel where concrete walls funneled sweat-drenched air and the metallic odor of pyrotechnics. Techs in headsets parted to let them through, shooting curious looks. At an intersection of back passages, Harrison reappeared, ticket still in hand, expression unreadable. "Do you trust me, Miss Novakova?" "Yes?" The answer surfaced without thought. "Good. I can't promise where this will end, but I can get you to the stage lip. Beyond that..." He let the sentence dangle. The implied risk hovered. If anything broke protocol, public relations dominoes could topple. Fines, lawsuits, firings. They emerged at the mouth of the arena bowl. Sound hit Lena like surf. Guitars, horns, the whip crack of a snare shot through reverb engines the size of freight cars. She had dreamed of this decibel storm, but reality pressed so hard against her chest She feared her ribs might bow. Harrison gestured. 2 ushers cleared a front-row aisle seat, coaxing an elderly couple to shuffle sideways. The cushions were printed with the Pepsi logo. The armrests still glistened from spilled soda. Lena's knees buckled as she sat. 4 meters ahead, separated only by a steel barricade, surged a sea of standing fans. Arms thrust upward, sequined gloves flashing like fish scales under strobes. They chanted Michael's name in 20 different accents. Alina dropped into the seat beside her daughter, hands trembling too badly to adjust her coat. For a moment, mother and child simply existed inside the tidal roar. Overwhelmed. Disbelieving. The song ended. House lights cut to black. The crowd's scream rose several octaves, an animal sound of hunger. Then, a single spotlight ignited high above, carving a pure white column on the main stage. In that second, something shifted in the collective psyche of everyone present. Security staff, roadies, ushers, fans. They sensed a deviation from script, an un-westernized glitch in an otherwise seamless American blockbuster. From the wings, a lean silhouette in fedora glided not toward center stage, but down the stairs, moving with predatory purpose. For 10 heartbeats, no one processed the absurdity. Michael Jackson, breaking his own code, walking straight toward the audience before the next cue was even loaded. Lena knew before the stadium did. She felt a ripple in the frequency field, a hush beneath the scream. She inhaled, the scent of smoke machines and leather conditioner flooding her senses. Her fingers opened in her lap, as though preparing to receive something fragile. The King of Pop strode onto the narrow photo pit ramp. His sequined jacket scattered light like shrapnel, but his face, when floodlights caught it, held an expression of ferocious intent. He walked until metal rails stopped him inches from Lena's seat. For a heartbeat that lasted a lifetime, artist and audience regarded one another. A girl sightless yet unblinking. A man who had spent his life dazzling millions, now confronted with a singular quiet. He extended a gloved hand. No words, just the hush of 50,000 fans gulping the same breath. Lena reached up. Cloth met skin. Heat bled through rhinestones. And in that instant, the earlier humiliation evaporated like mist in sunrise. She rose, steadied by his grip, and felt the world rotate. Every wrong note resolving into the long-awaited chord. Behind them, crew radios erupted in panic. Stage managers barked into mics. Lighting engineers scrambled to follow an unscheduled star. But the roar of the crowd crushed every technical objection. Story eclipsed script. Lena could not see the lights blooming overhead, nor the ocean of upturned faces merging into color. But she felt Michael's silent promise vibrating through his fingertips. You are not an obstacle. You are the point. And somewhere, just beyond the barricade where Keller still stood, the security captain realized that sometimes the only rule that matters is the one you break for the right reason. The orchestra strike that launched The Way You Make Me Feel exploded across the arena. Drums pounded like liberated hearts. And for the first time in her life, Lena heard the world and did not feel outside it. Backstage at the Olympia Stadion was engineered to muffle chaos, yet the concrete still throbbed with the hundreds-kilowatt heartbeat outside. Fluorescent tubes buzzed over crates of wireless packs, costume racks, pallets of bottled water. An entire mobile city compressed into catacombs beneath the grandstands. At the center of that hive, in a windowless dressing room that smelled faintly of cedar oil and rosin, Michael Jackson knelt on a folded towel and let the minutes drain through his fingertips. He practiced this ritual before every arena date. 3 slow inhalations, palms pressed together, forehead resting on the back of his hands, the way a child bows against quilted pews. Sometimes he whispered a psalm, other times only a single word. Listen, repeating it until the letters dissolved into a pulse. The world above him was currently howling for entertainment, but Michael searched for the quietest syllable inside the howl, convinced that one pure note could steer an evening away from spectacle and toward communion. Through the cinder-block wall, he could pick out the pre-show tape loop, snippets of Billie Holiday, then a 30-second silence engineered to heighten tension, then the guttural synth swell that triggered fireworks. 6 minutes remained. A timid knock fractured the calm. Bill Bray, head of security for the tour since its first night in Tokyo, cracked the door but stayed outside the threshold, a rule as sacred as the ritual. 2 minutes with wardrobe, then we walk, he reminded softly. Michael nodded without lifting his head. Bray withdrew. The latch clicked, leaving only the fluorescent hum and the faint rustle of silk as Michael stood. He slipped into the white undershirt, a dresser held out. Feeling the raw silk kiss scars on his shoulders the public never saw. Next came the stone-studded jacket, heavier than plate armor yet cut so cunningly that every spin made it look weightless. Velcro hissed, magnets clicked, sequins caught the light. In the mirror, he was now the icon the world expected, but his eyes, half-lidded, pupils enormous, remained somewhere deeper, scanning interior distance. Down the corridor, a different drama erupted. Sam Bird Kelly, first chair sax on the horn line, sprinted past coiled cable reels, waving his laminate like a holy writ. He had barged through 2 choke points already, pleading with stage managers too committed to the timetable to listen. At the service compound junction, he collided with David Harrison, the road manager, nearly toppling both meal ticket and sax case. "Slow down, Bird. Show starts in 5. Harrison's voice carried a buried Carolina drawl, sanded smooth by years of radio interviews. "It's about a fan who can't get in. Blind girl from Czechoslovakia. Tickets legit. Security bounced her." Kelly fired, breathless. "Boss, she hears rhythm like perfect pitch. I don't know, man. It feels wrong." Harrison's jaw worked. Ethical dilemmas at T-5 minutes were unwelcome visitors. "Rules are clear. No deviations. We don't stop a German crowd once it's lit." "I'm not saying stop. Just tell him." Kelly jerked a thumb toward the dressing hallway. "If he hears it and decides no, fine. But if he never knows—" A resigned groan escaped Harrison. He shoved a hand through already sweaty hair. "Make it 60 seconds. You get me fired, I'll haunt your Grammy speech." They moved. Bill Bray intercepted them like a linebacker. "Absolutely not. He's centering. Any disruption." From inside the dressing room, Michael's voice floated out. "Let them in, Bill." Unraised, unhurried, yet it cut through the tension the way a bowed glass rim slices silence. Bray stepped aside. Kelly entered first, hat in hand. Not since his audition had he hyperventilated so noticeably. Harrison followed, flanking like counsel. Michael, half-laced glove dangling from one hand, merely inclined his head. "You have something important, Sam." Kelly described the gate scene, the skeptical guard, the counterfeit accusation, the impromptu chorus of "Man in the Mirror," the girl counting rests, as though a metronome ticked behind her eyes. Words tumbled, colliding, until he reached the last detail. "She never saw light, but she says music paints it for her." And then he stopped, panting. Michael's eyelids fluttered, as if tasting the flavor of that sentence. He motioned for the ticket. Kelly produced it, frayed edges and all. Michael weighed the cardboard rectangle, thumb tracing the blunt corners. Sweat had warped the print. Perfume, cheap lilac, clung to the fibers. He did something no one expected. Lifted it to his ear. A show tech blinked, confused. Michael explained nothing. He simply listened. The way people hold seashells for echo. As if the ticket might relay every vibration it had absorbed crossing borders. 1 full minute passed. Harrison shifted, eyeing his stopwatch. 3 minutes to showtime. Bray crossed his arms, rehearsing rebuttals. The dresser held a final spur-shaped buckle, hands trembling. Michael lowered the ticket. "If we leave her outside, the first note will be sour," he said, voice flat but resolute. "Fetch her." Harrison exhaled. Relief? Dread? Hard to parse. Bray's voice sharpened. "Michael, the pyro cue is locked. House lights are ready. 75,000 people will riot if there's a gap." "Reschedule the gap," Michael replied. He fixed Bray with a gaze so calm it felt like deep water. "I don't perform unless she's inside." No hysteria, no volume, just immutable law. For a second it seemed Bray might argue on principle. Then memory flickered behind his eyes. Manila 87, a delayed entry that almost toppled barricades, yet Michael had stayed backstage until a sick child was lifted clear of a crush. That night ended in applause, not lawsuits. Bray snapped to the headset at his shoulder. "Hold roll cue alpha. Patch to house manager. Opening tape loop extended." Static crackled. Producers cursed. But the order flew. Michael turned to Kelly. "You'll guide me." "Me?" Kelly squeaked. "You found her. It's your tempo." He slid the second glove in place, flexing fingers so crystals scattered prism sparks across concrete. Out in the arena tunnel, the expanded tape loop restarted. Billie Holiday again, confusing the audience accustomed to the usual countdown. A murmuring ripple spread through the tiers. Some assumed tech failure, others an avant-garde flourish. Lighters twinkled like fireflies while fans waited. Restlessness edging into concern. Bray cleared a service corridor, running point. Kelly trotted beside Michael, breathing like a man racing his shadow. Stagehands flattened against walls as the unplanned procession advanced. At the production crossroad, lighting director Bill Fagan leaned from his console area yelling, "You're 20 seconds from blackout!" Bray shot him a slash-throat gesture. Hold. Michael's brain catalogued sensory fragments. The metallic smell of rigging. The ozone tang from sparklers already preheated for the opener. A distant whistle of wind through vomitories. Yet under every detail pulsed that single imperative. Bring the girl. Each step synced with his own heartbeat, which he counted unconsciously at exactly 108 BPM. The tempo of "The Way You Make Me Feel," now predestined to be the first live song instead of fourth. At the base of the access stairs, a junior floor manager handed Kelly a radio. "Gate C officer leading your party up." Crackling German followed. Coordinates, crowd density, a barked acknowledgement. Michael listened without seeming to, absorbing geometry. He needed the map not for his feet, they knew the route, but for timing the reveal to music. Surprise was art. Chaos was not. They paused near the dim glow of a cargo elevator where plaster dust fell like snow each time the crowd stomped overhead. Kelly wiped sweat from his brow. "She'll be here in 1, the radio promised. Harrison jogged up, cheeks crimson. "We can stall 3 more minutes, max. After that, the noise floor spikes, decibel fines, city regs." Bray grunted unhelpfully. Michael closed his eyes. In darkness, he recalled a night in Gary, Indiana, when he was 5, sneaking outside the church hall to watch a high school band through a crack in the siding. He could not see the drummer, only hear triplets on a ride cymbal, ghost notes on the snare. That pattern still lived inside him, proof that you didn't need sightlines to belong. A taste of that memory made his next inhale slow, deliberate. He opened his eyes. Down the corridor appeared a small figure flanked by 2 security jackets, Alina's coat fluttering, Lena's cane tapping. Kelly blurted a laugh of relief, half weeping. Michael moved forward before anyone could choreograph the moment. As he approached, Lena's head lifted, as though the change in the corridor's resonance announced him more clearly than footfalls, and her lips parted on a quiet, "Oh." There was no handshake. He offered his forearm. She accepted like a knight receiving sword blade. Her fingers, cool, slender, closed around sequin and silk. Michael looked to Bray. Clear path. House lights cut when I hit the ramp. Orders relayed, circuits rerouted. Somewhere in the darkness overhead, the spotlight crew recalibrated arcs. Engineers live-patched time code so the band would tumble directly from the 4th loop into live track 2 bars after Michael's forward motion was registered on a pressure mat. Years of tour discipline flexed like a single organism adjusting its spine, Bray signaled. The group moved. Harrison 10 paces back, Kelly lugging his sacks, 2 security men bracketing. Lena's cane folded under one arm, now useless. Michael's stride matched hers precisely, neither rushing nor pampering. They ascended the steel staircase where stage haze curled like dragon breath. A gust of night air, tinged with cordite from fireworks, swept across them. At the threshold of the stage's left vomitory, Michael halted. He angled his head, listening. The audience had grown uneasy. Whistles, scattered chants. Then a sudden hush when the tape loop faded mid-phrase. Silence, too pregnant to sustain. Perfect. He squeezed Lena's hand. Silent code. Ready? She exhaled, the tiniest tremor escaping, but her chin remained proud. Bray whispered into the mic, "Cue blackout." Darkness fell like a guillotine blade. Every cell phone shuddered in shock. In that inked pause, Michael stepped forward, Lena beside him, into the womb of the arena's collective gaze. Floodlights detonated white, catching the sequins, forging constellations across jacket and glove. Gasps rippled from upper decks down to pit barricades. The star was not center stage, but in the aisle, hand in hand with a girl no one recognized. Musicians on in-ear monitors received a frantic count. 1, 2, and slammed into the pickup of "The Way You Make Me Feel," snares cracking like rifle salute. The roar that followed bent steel. Michael guided Lena toward her promised seat, every step tethered to the downbeat, every breath a refusal to let a single barrier, geography, bureaucracy, darkness, stand between a listener and the light she deserved. Behind him, Bray exhaled a curse that was also a prayer of gratitude. The storm had been faced, the choice made. And as the first verse unfurled, Michael felt no weight from the jeweled jacket, no dread about tomorrow's headlines, only the certainty that the sharpest shadow always precedes the brightest flare. The instant Lena's soles left the tunnel and touched the sprung flooring of the camera lane, the sound hit her like surf breaking inside her chest. It was not a single roar, but thousands of discrete voices plated into one elemental force. Hunger, wonder, disbelief, and a bright crackle of confusion that always accompanies an unscripted miracle. Michael felt it first as a vibration underfoot. A fraction of a second later, it became a gale that pushed against his ribcage. It would have been easy, comforting even, to raise a hand and reassure the masses that this was planned, a flourish of showmanship. Instead, he lowered his center of gravity, threaded his arms under Lena's knees and shoulders, and lifted her. The move was silent, smooth, practiced on mannequins in dance rehearsal, but never on a living girl whose heartbeat now fluttered under sequined cloth. All at once, the temperature around them changed. Stadium lights boiled against bare skin, yet a draft of night air spiraled up from the orchestra pit, carrying pyrotechnic residue and the metallic scent of sweat-soaked barricades. High above, follow spots scrambled to track their quarry, beams crossing like rapiers. The operators, half blind from the sudden cue deviation, overshot by meters before correcting. Flat discs of light skimmed the crowd, conjuring ghosts in the tiers. Phones and camcorders erupted, a glitter storm of tiny red LEDs, though most footage began as a jittering tintype tableau. Michael Jackson striding sideways across the thrust, cradling a girl nobody could name. Lena could not see the miracle she had become, but she felt every syllable of it. Her cheek brushed his collar. The fabric smelled of detergent, stage fog, and something oddly pastoral, maybe cedar oil from the trunk where the jacket slept between cities. Under that scent thrummed a pulse steady as a click track. She memorized it the way other children memorize constellations. One day she would wake from surgery and still be able to beat it out on a tabletop. Boom ka boom kaka hush, the private metronome of legend. Security scrambled along the rim of the barricade like hounds chasing a spark through dry grass. In the production well, monitor mixers cursed. Their sightlines to the star had vanished behind a sea of lifted arms. Yet the band played on, rescued by muscle memory. They pounded into the second chorus of The Way You Make Me Feel, stretching the turnarounds 4 extra bars to buy time. The drummer's eyes flicked to his click light, off the grid but salvageable. He leaned forward, sticks blurring, feverish grin beneath sweatband. "We ride with him," he muttered, half prayer, half command. Michael reached the crash barrier at stage right, where a single folding chair, Pepsi co-brand emblazoned across the backrest, awaited its sponsor's contest winner. It had been an empty marketing gesture minutes ago. Now, it was holy ground. He bent, knees flexing with dancer's precision, and placed Lena lightly onto the vinyl seat. For a breath, neither of them moved. 2 unmoving figures in the thunder of 70,000. He kept her left hand in his gloved right. No grand flourish, just an anchor. When Lena's shoes touched concrete, the stadium seemed to exhale. A ripple of disbelief turned into a fusillade of cheers that climbed in pitch until it no longer resembled language. Alina arrived seconds later, shepherded by a junior usher pale with adrenaline. She nearly collapsed against the barricade, part relief, part vertigo, at seeing her child elevated, glorified, made safe. Michael met her gaze, soft, apologetic, and nodded once. It was a signature as binding as any contract. A snap of fingers into his lapel microphone told the lighting desk he was ready. On the Jumbotron, his profile flared 40 feet tall, jaw set, eyes forward, curl of sweat-dark hair stuck to his temple. The arrangement pivoted mid-bar, horns punched, guitars slid up the neck. Dancers on the main platform picked up the hit without a count. He released Lena's hand, spun on the ball of one foot, and cat leaped back onto the runway glass fiber ramp. The motion looked effortless. In reality, his adductor screamed from the angle, But pain was a tax long since budgeted. Spotlights found him dead center just in time for the vocal ad-lib. "Hey, hey, pretty baby with the high heels on." The lyric cracked slightly at a high. Emotion edged his pitch, giving the line a rawness the record never risked. Fans shrieked, thinking it an intentional flourish. Only the monitor engineer knew the truth, gooseflesh prickling when he realized the king had, for once, let the show intrude on his control. Back at seat A1, Lena pressed both hands over her sternum as if to keep her heart from flying outward. The bass waves rolled through the barricade metal and rattled her molars. She could trace Michael's path by Doppler alone. The crowd roar shifted left when he moonwalked, forward when he snapped into a toe stand. Each ovation was a lighthouse flare sweeping her dark sea. She found herself smiling, not the shy, polite curve her teachers praised, but a wide, exultant grin that pushed tears from ducts unused to such draft. Beyond the front light, chaos brewed. Stage manager Tara Green clutched her clipboard like a shield, headset ablaze. "Camera 2, you stayed tight on him," she barked. "Camera 5, wide cutaways only, no lingering on the girl. Repeat, don't feed her to broadcast." Upstairs, in the mobile OB truck, executive producer Evan Steiger slammed his fist against the switcher console. "We don't have clearance," he hissed. "Legal will crucify us if we put a minor on tape without consent." Technicians nodded, dutiful, though every fiber of them wanted the shot. Camera 2's operator was a veteran named Armin Wexler, 2 decades on rock crews, glaucoma creeping at the edges of his vision. He heard the order, but his lens never left seat A1. Through glass, he saw the girl's chin raise each time Michael sang, "Baby," as though the syllable were tethered to a string knotted to her chest. Wexler's thumb flipped a hidden toggle. A secondary recordings deck spooled quietly. No tally light. The image would never enter the instant feed. It would, however, commit itself to magnetic tape spinning in a foam-lined flight case. One reel for the vault, one clone for his personal shelf. He didn't know why he did it. He only knew history when it danced inches from his tripod. Upstage, pyrotechs paced. The open flames, cued for Smooth Criminal, were now off-sequence, CO2 canisters venting uselessly. They'd be lucky to salvage half the cues, but even the pyro chief, hardened show warrior, found himself grinning. The plan had disintegrated, yet the evening felt freshly minted, as though every rehearsed bar had been a chrysalis cracked open to reveal a wilder butterfly. The song bled into the breakdown, percussionists trading fours, synth horns stuttering like engine backfire. Michael sidestepped toward the edge of the thrust again and looked down at Lena. He didn't speak. Too many microphones open. Too much risk of feedback. Instead, he lifted his hand overhead and snapped. A single strobe flashed. Dancers froze. Silence toppled into the arena like a felled oak. He pointed at Lena. Then he pressed 2 fingertips to his own lips and extended them outward, stage language shouting, "Thank you." The hush held for half a heartbeat, then shattered. The scream was nuclear. Blood rushed behind Lena's ears until she could hear nothing but white hiss. Tears spattered her cheeks, but she wasn't crying from sorrow. Her lacrimal glands had simply surrendered to overload, opening floodgates in a system designed for ordinary tides. Michael pivoted, gave the band a thumbs up. They detonated straight into Bad. Double-time intro, horns blazing. Dancers hurled themselves forward. Whatever derailment the set list had endured was now fused into new order. Spontaneity welded to muscle memory. In the seats, Alina grasped the railing, unsure whether to cheer or pray. Her daughter was radiant, a gemstone turned toward sudden sun. Behind them, rows of VIPs peered over Ray-Bans. Some applauded, others frowned at the break in choreography. The local promoter chewed his mustache, calculating insurance clauses. 2 nights of load-in, 1 night of mayhem. Worth every Deutsche Mark, he decided. Tabloids would feast. At FOH, the audio chief watched peak meters flirt with red. He panned rhythm guitar fractionally right, opening a pocket where the vocals could soar. Each tweak was a surgeon's stitch in a living artery. He glanced across the crowd and saw something he would remember decades later. A blind girl in the front row, one hand on her heart, the other raised sky-high, palm outward, as though blessing the thousands behind her. From that moment, the concert felt less like entertainment and more like a liberating rite. Michael sang Dirty Diana with a ferocity the tour hadn't yet witnessed. During the bridge of Human Nature, he altered a lyric, "See that girl, she knows it's meant to be." And, though only a few understood, Lina blushed scarlet beneath stadium glare. But storms often seed afterglows with trouble. Backstage, Harrison fielded calls from label executives already awake in New York. "Say again," they demanded. "He did what with who?" Lawyers drafted statements. PR drafted silences. Insurance reps consulted indemnity clauses concerning unauthorized audience interaction. Meanwhile, Bill Bray assembled a corridor tribunal. Head of security, local police liaison, 2 stern officials from the Munich Fire Brigade. Their grievance, unplanned aisle obstruction during a crowd density spike. Bray listened, nodding, but his eyes drifted to the monitors where Michael, center stage, knelt on invisible cables and let the final chord of "I Just Can't Stop Loving You" ring out like a cathedral bell. The camera caught Lina's face in that instant, open, trusting, lit from within. Bray's cynicism melted just enough to seed an unexpected loyalty. He would shield this outcome. Paperwork be damned. 13 songs later, the main set slammed to blackout. An encore stomp began. Boots hammering 4/4 so the concrete stands trembled. Michael, dripping sweat, jogged back down the runway. He stopped at seat A1, crouched, and whispered into Lina's ear. No microphone caught it, no journalist transcribed it. Lina only nodded, smile quivering. He pressed something into her palm, a slip of folded laminate, and sprinted away for the encore opener, Billie Jean. The lights went out entirely after Thriller. House banks, concession bulbs, even signage dimmed, an unofficial tribute to the soul of the night. In the blackness, Harrison and Bray appeared, offering hands. Lina rose, legs rubber, mother beside her. A small convoy hustled them through a service exit, while the crowd chanted, "Michael, Michael!" into the stars. Inside the utilitarian hush of a medic bay, Lina finally unfolded what Michael had given her. An all-access pass laminated in glitter film, her name sharpied on the back, and below it, a hotel suite number. On a second slip, hotel letterhead, embossed cream, 3 words in looping cursive. "Tomorrow we talk." She pressed the card to her lips. She could not see its shine, but she felt the ridges of embossed stars and knew she held a door. Somewhere outside, camera reels cooled, copy decks spun, and the city of Munich digested the night. A legend had bent protocol to lift a girl who could not see, and in doing so had exposed how thin the distance was between darkness and the brightest light imaginable. History rarely announces itself in real time. It steals forward under guise of chaos, then stands revealed as Destiny. Tonight, Destiny wore Swarovski crystals, smelled faintly of cedar, and whispered across a deafening arena, so that one blind listener could finally believe the world was luminous. The corridor outside dressing room, smelled of spent fireworks and fresh toner. The residue of celebration mingled with the chemical tang of hastily printed legal forms. 20 minutes had passed since the final encore, yet the concrete arteries beneath Munich's Olympiastadion still quivered with aftershock. A single security bulb flickered overhead, casting stop-motion halos on the carpet as 6 people filed through the threshold and shut the door behind them. Inside, the cacophony of teardowns seemed to vanish. The room had been acoustically treated for vocal warm-ups, and it swallowed sound the way padded cells swallow screams. Fluorescent tubes buzzed coldly above mirrored vanities. Cans of Pepsi, brand obligations half-sipped and forgotten, lined the counter like abandoned chess pieces. In the center, at a narrow conference table commandeered from catering, sat Michael Jackson, shoulders squared, hands folded so perfectly they resembled a sculptor's reference model. He wore the same stone-studded jacket, but the sequins no longer sparked. Under hospital white light, they looked like frozen tears. Opposite him settled David Harrison, tour road manager. His showtime bravado traded for actuary calm. To Harrison's left, Nancy Reed, VP of Tour Logistics for Epic Records, snapped open a binder thick with clauses. Beside her perched Karl Russler, the German promoter, eyes rimmed red from equal parts drink and panic. Bill Bray lingered near the doorframe, an ironwood statue in a tailored suit. Rounding out the gathering was Paul Vincent, senior counsel flown in from London for insurance oversight, wrists already cuff-linked to tomorrow's risk assessment. Reed spoke first, voice cooler than the air conditioning. "Michael, we need to document what happened tonight. The deviation from approved procedure resulted in multiple contractual exposures." She tapped a stack of printouts, fax paper still curling at the edges. "Local safety ordinances, broadcast rights, brand use permits. Our partners are concerned." Michael's expression neither welcomed nor rejected the words. His gaze rested somewhere in middle distance, as though he were watching the faint replay of a dream on the far wall. His silence created a gravitational imbalance. Harrison cleared his throat. "Look, it was a beautiful gesture. Nobody here doubts your intent, but headlines write themselves. Manipulative stunt, manufactured miracle, exploitation of disability. You know how that plays stateside." Russler shifted, jacket squeaking. "German press can be harsher. They will ask if the girl was a plant to juice ticket sales." He produced a glossy tabloid mock-up already drafted by a rival outlet, König des Pops, König der Tricks, and slid it across the table. Michael did not glance down. Vincent steepled manicured fingers. "Our objective tonight is containment. Epic's board will approve a limited statement. No identification of the minor, no acknowledgement of direct contact. We position it as spontaneous crowd interaction within standard security parameters." He slid a 4-page document forward, the title printed in diplomatic Helvetica. "Mutual Non-Disclosure and Media Guideline, Addendum G, Bad European Leg." Reed uncapped a pen, placed it in front of Michael. "Sign, and tomorrow we roll into Vienna with a clean slate." No voice answered. A faraway forklift beeped in the loading bay, then went silent again. Harrison leaned in. "Mike, the machine is delicate. Insurance, licensing, sponsors, they don't understand magic. They understand risk. One photo of you carrying a blind child is gold. If We control the narrative. If we don't, it's a legal snare. Let us protect you. Protect the tour. For 12 measured seconds, the only sound was the tick of a quartz travel clock on the vanity. Then Michael's right hand moved, slow as a falling leaf, reaching for a plain hotel notepad that lay overturned beside his monitor wedge. He turned the pad face up. Fresh blue ink glimmered on the top sheet, lines filled with tight cursive. None could read it from their side. He set the pad on the NDA like a bookmark, then picked up Reed's pen. The signatures came in 3 strokes, fluid, unhurried. He finished, recapped the pen, slid it back across the table. With equal deliberateness, he took the handwritten page, only a single leaf, and folded it twice. The fold lines were careful, creased by thumbnail, edges aligned with meticulous grace. He placed the folded letter on top of the ink-drying contract and pressed his palm flat upon both, as though sealing something invisible beneath. Only then did he speak, voice no louder than rustling silk. This stays with her. 2 syllables, her, filled more space than the entire room full of legalese. Bray, reading the cue, stepped forward. "Understood," he said, though the playbook in his head screamed contradiction. Reed opened her mouth, thought better, closed it hard enough to click enamel. Harrison exhaled through his nose and slid the contract stack, including the hidden letter, into a manila envelope. He nodded at Bray. Meeting adjourned. The corridor's hush vanished beyond the dressing room door. Now came the backwash of loadout. Roadies barking inventory numbers, rigging cables snapping off carabiners, gear cases rumbling like distant thunder. Bray moved through it all with the envelope pressed to his chest, expression unreadable behind mirrored lenses. At catering, he passed the package to Aaron Fields, Michael's junior personal assistant, a 26-year-old with perfect teeth and a perpendicular ponytail. "Deliver to Hotel Königshof, room 712, guest registered under Novakova," Bray ordered. "Tonight." Fields nodded, pocketed the envelope, and continued toward the fleet of waiting vans. But at the vehicle bay, he hesitated. Camera flashes ignited through the security fence. Reporters yelled mangled questions in 3 languages. A PR coordinator whispered that news desks were sniffing for any scrap to confirm the girl's identity. Fields weighed the envelope's thickness in his hand. His career was a lattice of good optics and 0 liabilities. One stray fan letter tumbling into the wrong column might snap that lattice. He glanced around, found no witness, and slipped into the maintenance corridor that ran behind the generator room. A wheeled trash gondola stood there, black liner gaping. Fields removed the NDA, verified signatures, and tucked the legal pages back into his briefcase. Those were required for tomorrow's insurance verification. The folded note, however, he held like contraband. A moment of conscience flickered, tiny, insufficient, and died. He dropped the note into the bin, pressed it under a wad of stage fog gauze, and walked away. Minutes later, Leonid Chernov, night janitor, on contract since the '72 Olympics, steered the gondola down Service Tunnel D. Leonid had survived 4 recessions, 2 divorces, and the slow rot of his pension. Nothing surprised him except kindness. As he compacted the trash, a square of Cream Hotel stationery tumbled free. He checked for lipstick kisses, souvenirs that sometimes fetched Deutsche Marks from teenage runners, but saw only looping American cursive and a name spelled with diacritics he couldn't pronounce. Rather than shred it, he slid the note into the breast pocket of his boiler suit. He believed that any letter thrown away unopened carried a curse on the writer's heart. Best to keep it safe until fate decided otherwise. Leonid finished his shift at 03:17 a.m., punched his time card, and biked home along the Isar Canal. The letter, now warm from his body heat, lay beside a jar of loose screws on his kitchen shelf. He meant to ask his niece to translate it one day. Instead, it gathered dust for decades, patient as dormant seed. Back in the Königshof's presidential suite, Michael stood alone by a curtained window, city lights twinkling like distant metronomes. The horizon flickered with red aircraft beacons, tiny reminders of how many invisible roots stitch the night sky. He pressed two fingertips to the glass, tracing patterns only he could see. Rhythms of roads, tempos of traffic lights, the subtle swing of wind in the plane trees 4 stories below. Somewhere in this labyrinth was a 14-year-old girl who now believed the world could open like a stage door. He whispered her name once, quiet enough that even the drapes didn't stir, then let the word dissipate into the conditioned silence. Behind him, the suite telephone rang, Harrison's voice reporting that all documents were signed, all files contained. Michael answered in a murmur, offered thanks, ended the call. But the ledger in his mind kept a different accounting. A promise made, a letter sent, and a faith that paper, even mislaid, could one day outshout the chorus of corporate caution. Outside, delivery trucks rumbled toward the Autobahn, and dawn's violet seam began to unstitch the eastern edge of the sky. Backstage, the arena lights winked out one by one, leaving only a single utility lamp burning above a broom closet where a folded note waited, unseen, untouched, unforgotten. Morning pooled slowly across Munich, a colorless hush seeping through heavy drapes and over the carpeted hush of the Königshof's 6th-floor corridor. Lena woke before the first tram rattled Karlsplatz, roused not by light she could never see, but by the sudden absence of music. Her internal orchestra, still vibrating with snare cracks and brass stabs, had downshifted to a dull echo, as though someone had closed the door on a rehearsal room 3 streets away. She lay motionless for a long minute, listening. Mother's measured breathing in the next bed, air conditioning whirring, a pigeon's wings buffeting the sill. The world sounded ordinary again, and that ordinariness frightened her more than any backstage stampede. Alina stirred, swung her legs to the floor, and inhaled with a tremor that managed to fold gratitude and dread into one breath. "Maybe we dreamed it," she whispered in Czech, half jest, half shield against disappointment. She pressed her palms to Lena's cheeks, searching for fever, for proof the night had been real. The girl's smile, gentle, tired, answered nothing yet. Downstairs the lobby smelled of polish and cardamom, the latter drifting from a glass urn of Scandinavian mulled juice left over from the breakfast buffet. A handful of journalists milled near reception, hotel stationery tucked into jacket pockets like hunting licenses. They spoke in quick German bursts, set list confirmation, crowd size, charitable donations, but not one syllable about a blind Czech girl lifted over the barricade. Their tape recorders clicked, rewound, clicked again, assembling a narrative that fit the press release faxed at dawn. Michael Jackson delivers flawless show. No incidents reported. Alina approached the desk, voice pitched to courtesy. "My daughter, Novakova, room 712, was told perhaps something was left for her?" The clerk, a young man with skin like porcelain and posture drilled at hotel school, consulted a cubby board of envelopes. He shook his head, offered a regretful smile. "There is no item, gnädige Frau. Maybe check later?" Behind polite vowels, Lena caught a faint rustle of unease, as though staff had rehearsed that sentence more than once already. They retreated to the dining room. White-gloved servers poured coffee whose aroma filled the girl's skull with dark sweetness. Alina sipped, but kept glancing toward the entrance, expecting a swarm of photographers. None came. Instead, a stack of morning papers arrived by trolley. She unfolded the Süddeutsche Zeitung review. Technical brilliance, record attendance, hints of near-religious euphoria, yet not a word about the moment that had set the arena ablaze. The Abendzeitung devoted half a page to the new laser rig. The blind girl simply did not exist. Lena ran her fingertips lightly across the newsprint photographs. Pyro fountains, silhouette of a fedora mid-spin, and felt a hollowness open under her sternum. She remembered the exact humidity of Michael's jacket against her palms, the bass frequencies that had fluttered her dress, the suction of air when 50,000 throats had gasped in unison. Her body refused to forget, but ink and newswire had filed the night under myth. The dissonance made her dizzy. On the far side of the restaurant, a payphone rang. A man in corduroy scrambled to claim it. He spoke hushed German spliced with newsroom slang. Negative pickup, label pushback, no second source. He hung up, shoulders slumping, and shuffled toward the exit. Their worlds intersected for a breath. The girl anchored by memory, the reporter adrift in sanctioned amnesia. Then parted. By noon, the hotel lobby had emptied. Alina urged departure. The return rail would take 10 hours, and Brno's customs queue lengthened after lunch. Lena acquiesced, but her pulse quickened when she passed reception one last time. She leaned toward the counter, voice soft. "If something arrives for me later, could you send it to this address?" She dictated their home street, each consonant crisp. The clerk nodded, scribbled carefully, yet Lena heard the faint shrug in his tone, the shrug of a man who expected no further miracles. The intercity coach rattled east through Bavarian farmland glazed with June light. Around them, tourists burbled about set pieces, costume changes, encore count. Every scrap, but the one Lena replayed, behind closed lids. She kept a hand on the window frame, counting telegraph poles, mapping rhythm onto distance. Her mother dozed, waking intermittently to stroke Lena's braid, each time frowning, as though searching for residue of something she could not name. At home, the reaction was quicker, harsher. Neighbors gathered by the communal letterbox, hungry for exotic anecdotes. When they learned no newspaper carried proof, curiosity soured into skepticism. One uncle declared it Western propaganda. A classmate sniggered that Lena had fabricated the tale for attention. How convenient that blind people couldn't produce photographs. Lena endured the gossip in silence, but each whispered doubt felt like static scratching vinyl, marring the perfect groove she had carried from Munich. Radio Brno invited her for an interview, then canceled without explanation. The host later admitted, shame-voiced, that the station manager feared legal reprisals from foreign interests. Alina ripped the cancellation letter into ribbons. Weeks passed. The ache dulled, but never settled. Lena would wake some nights convinced she could still smell stage smoke, only to find her pillow cold and the apartment cloaked in socialist drabness. She hunted for bootleg tapes of the Munich show. None surfaced. The official live album skipped Munich entirely, cutting from Rotterdam to Vienna, as if a cartographer had erased one star from the map. One afternoon, a parcel arrived without return address. Inside lay a single photograph, grainy, underexposed. Michael Jackson mid-stride, a small figure in his arms. The angle was oblique, the lighting brutal, but Lena recognized the tilt of his chin, the cascade of her own hair against his elbow. Elena clutched the print, tears threatening. On the back, someone had written, Sektor C. Reihe 2 Kanon A1 kein Blitzung. No sender's name. Hope flared anew, then dimmed. Editors still refused the story. Without multiple verified images, one replied, audience will call it staged. The photograph returned to a shoebox in Lena's wardrobe, stored beside ticket stubs frayed to velvet. 60 kilometers away, in a Munich newsroom, the man from the hotel phone booth, Matthias Kruger, junior culture writer at Münchner Morgenblatt, brooded over the same print. His editor had vetoed publication, citing ad buys from Sony. Kruger's frustration sharpened into resolve. If official channels were barricaded, he would dig alleyways. He cross-referenced hotel registries, sifted through radio contest transcripts, dialed numbers that crackled across borders like clandestine broadcasts. Every path fogged at the name Novakova. Files misplaced, tapes erased, clerks suddenly vague. Each dead end confirmed his hunch. Someone with reach was sweeping tracks. He pinned the photograph above his desk, a private North Star. Whenever a colleague scoffed, he would quote an old proverb his grandmother used. Truth is a coal. I can't swallow it. I can't spit it out. The newsroom laughed, moved on, but the coal remained, scorching his palate. Kruger's next move was audacious. He contacted a retired customs officer rumored to have assisted a blind Czech girl at the border in June. The man remembered only a cane that clicked like a metronome and a train that smelled of coal smoke and possibility. No names. Still, it was a thread, and Kruger tucked it into a notebook already fat with scribbles. Hotel list, radio frequencies, Czech surnames circled in blue. He did not yet know that the crucial clue lay folded in the boiler suit pocket of a janitor who had since emigrated to Canada, nor that a young assistant's fear had set the entire chain in motion. But history is patient. It gathers breadcrumbs until even the smallest footstep becomes a trail. In Brno, Lena folded laundry to the rhythm of muffled cassette grooves, her Walkman batteries fading. Occasionally she pressed pause and let silence settle, assessing how long the echo of music lingered in her skull before dissolving. She feared the day the echo would vanish entirely. Yet beneath that fear pulsed a stubborn ember, the conviction that somewhere, perhaps already traveling across oceans, a message with her name on it was still in transit, refusing extinction. "And if it never arrives?" her mother asked once, fragile with worry. "Then we write our own letter back," Lena answered, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. In that moment, the shoebox in the wardrobe seemed to hum, as though paper and photograph and half-remembered frequencies were conspiring, plotting escape routes through the muffled corridors of official silence. Outside, summer slipped toward autumn, and the first cool wind rattled tram cables like muted cymbals. The world remained officially unchanged. No headlines, no acknowledgments. But beneath the bureaucratic quiet, notes were still vibrating, tucked inside suit pockets, pinned above cluttered desks, stored in shoeboxes, waiting for the bar of rest to resolve into the next undeniable chord. The next city arrived the way thunder does. First, a silent flicker on the horizon, then an instant of quaking air that leaves furniture vibrating long after the flash is gone. Michael felt it before the wheels of the charter touched Vienna, a faint vertigo that no pressurized cabin could explain. His doctors would have called it exhaustion, but the word was too small. It was more like a gravity well tugging at the space just behind his breastbone, a tug measured in beats and rests, not hours of sleep. Sound check unfolded with practiced precision, yet something brittle had crept into the ritual. When he sang the test scale, the notes stood perfectly in line, soldiers on parade. But the final syllable refused to settle, hovering an eighth tone sharp, as though unsure which army it belonged to. The crew exchanged quick glances. "Acoustics," the monitor engineer muttered, twisting a knob he knew was already set. Michael only nodded, but he heard the tremor none of them dared name. By late September, the Bad Tour had become a traveling universe. 53 articulated lorries, 2 charter jets, a payroll larger than some town councils. From the outside, the machine appeared flawless. Lights leapt, dancers spun, merchandise stalls emptied their crates. But backstage, a quaint superstition was spreading. If Michael closed his dressing room door and the hallway fell completely silent, the show would start heavy, like a needle dropping on warped vinyl. That hush had begun in Munich, and it shadowed every venue thereafter. Hamburg, Lyon, Zurich. The pattern repeated. Just before the last wardrobe call, Michael would pause by the bulletin board plastered with fan letters. He sorted them by tactile cues: flimsy notebook paper, expensive linen, printing ink still tacky, but never found the handwriting he was hunting for. Aaron Fields stood discreetly to one side. "All special correspondences delivered, Chief," he said each night, voice sunned with confidence. Michael thanked him, though the words soldered to his tongue. Rolling toward Brussels in a darkened sleeper coach, Michael asked again, casual, as if discussing set-list order. "Any word back from the Czech girl?" Fields looked up from a clipboard of hotel manifests, managed a quick smile. "Oh yes, Mr. Jackson. She's thrilled. Said she framed the note." He used the past tense too quickly. Michael caught it the way a conductor hears an off-beat triangle. Still, he let the sentence pass, because pressing a lie often drives it deeper. Quiet grew feral inside him. Returning to his bunk, he tried meditation, but Lena's name kept bubbling through the mantra like air in wet cement. Was she replaying the concert in her mind as he was, measuring each day against that furnace of sound? Or had the silence of newspapers reached her ears first, teaching her that miracles expire if nobody writes them down? 3 nights later, the tour arrived in Rotterdam for a double-header. The arena ceiling arched like a ship hull, acoustics so clean the high notes came back unsmudged. During Another Part of Me, Michael spotted a girl near the B-stage barricade, small, ponytailed, hands folded as though praying. Something in her stillness pricked him. Midline, he missed a choreographed glide, foot sliding half a beat late. Dancers compensated. Only road director Harrison noticed the slip. After the encore, Harrison caught up backstage, panting from the chase. "Stage hazard?" he asked. Michael shook his head. Memory. It was the closest he had come to confession in weeks. That same night, he instructed Harrison to retrieve contact data from the Bavarian radio station that had staged the original contest. The request moved swiftly through emissaries, or seemed to. 2 days later, the reply returned. All contest documentation lost during a tape purge for compliance with new data protection law. Even the press clippings had vanished, clipped by an intern for archiving and never seen again. Harrison relayed the news with a frown that said he no longer trusted his own phone line. On the bus, Michael scrawled a list of possibilities: bureaucratic misfire, corporate censorship, or intentional erasure. The last word he underlined twice. He thought of the spotless binder Nancy Reed had brandished in Munich, the elegant Helvetica of stipulations and hush. A system willing to erase footnotes could surely swallow a single Czech surname. The second Rotterdam show cracked something. During Human Nature, a spotlight grazed the crowd and illuminated that same ponytailed child hoisted on her father's shoulders. The likeness to Lena was passing, a tilt of chin, perhaps, but Michael's pulse spiked. He held the final falsetto 2 beats longer than scored, a plaintive wail that startled even him. When he exited, sweat poured off his hairline, though the temperature backstage was frigid. He confronted Fields in the corridor, voice low. Each word calibrated like a drum hit. "Tell me precisely how you delivered that letter." Fields's composure slipped. Syllables clattered. "Hotel. Front desk. Standard protocol." Michael waited, eyes unwavering. Fields's gaze darted sideways. Tiny flight signals nobody in an arena could detect, but impossible to hide at arm's length. "I will ask once more, Aaron." The assistant's mouth opened, closed. Footsteps approached. Harrison, Bray, a wardrobe tech with the next costume change. Fields seized the interruption, mumbled an apology, and vanished into a knot of rolling garment racks. Something inside Michael iced over. He looked at Bray. "I need a new chain of custody on everything that bears my signature." Bray, whose allegiance had been sliding away from the corporate center toward the performer himself, answered with a curt nod. Cities blurred past. Copenhagen's drizzle, Barcelona's perfumed nights, Oslo's thin October sun. Michael rehearsed the set daily, yet kept interleaving the order. Streetwalker, leapfrogged, bad. Man in the mirror, closed, instead of Dirty Diana. To outsiders, it felt like spontaneity. To veteran crew, it smelled like distraction. The band followed, but tension rose. If the conductor is searching for someone off stage, where does the orchestra look? One dawn on a Swedish tarmac, Michael took Harrison aside. "I want private investigators, quiet ones. Follow the paper trail, not the people." Harrison hesitated. Cost, optics, risk. But the glaze in Michael's eyes signaled non-negotiable. "Start with the janitorial staff," he added, drawing a sketch of supply corridors on a napkin from memory. It was an impossible request, yet the accuracy of the diagram unnerved Harrison more than any executive threat. A week later, a telex arrived at the hotel in Cologne. Contact attempt unsuccessful. Subject address unconfirmed. Records wiped at point of origin. Michael stared at the ribbon of punched letters until the ink blurred. Someone, somewhere, was working as hard to delete Lena as he was to find her. After that, he became porous to every child in the audience, every raised hand, every shy wave. Mid-song, he would catch a fragment of a young face and feel the stage tilt. Crew installed subtle handrails along ramps, blaming fatigue. But Bray knew better. The greater hazard was not a tumble. It was the moment the music ceased to feel like salvation and began to feel like penance. Yet each curtain call also stoked determination. If systems could be programmed to forget, memory had to live in bodies, in breath, in the restless hush that fell whenever the star disappeared behind a closed door. Lena's name lodged in Michael's chest like a seed under winter soil. Dormant, invisible, yet already cracking stone with its quiet insistence. Find me, find me, find me. And in Brno, autumn rain drummed chapel roofs, while a cassette rewound itself again and again, spools thinning, oxide flaking. Lena pressed an ear to the plastic, harvesting every remaining atom of sound. Somewhere in Europe, a singer's heart beat the same rhythm, echo-traveling corridors of tour buses, hotel vents, and late-night telex lines. Looking for the path back to the girl the world insisted was never there. Night settled thick over Brno, soaking the tram cables in a dull bronze gleam when Lena first felt the key shift. She was tucked beneath her bedsheets, Walkman headphones balanced like halos above each ear, rewinding a bootleg of Man in the Mirror until the magnetic tape rasped hot. The opening chord poured out as always, warm, certain, yet halfway through the second measure the snare receded as though dragged down a hallway. She nudged the volume wheel, expecting punch. What came instead was distance, a smallness she had never associated with that vaulting drum hit. She sat up too quickly. Blood flashed through her temples, and the room tipped. The cassette stopped on its own, batteries gasping. Even the silence that followed felt remote, coated in cotton. She rubbed her ears, pressed her palms flat, tapped the mattress to check vibration. The sound reached, but late. In that half-second lag lived a terror she had no language for. Winter thawed reluctantly, turning February streets to slush. At the regional clinic, corridors smelled of iodine and bureaucratic fatigue. The otolaryngologist, a woman with horn-rimmed glasses and the brisk kindness of a battlefield nurse, guided Lena through a forest of beeps and hisses. Audiograms printed like seismographs, steep slopes where healthy plateaus should stretch. Progressive sensorineural loss, she murmured to Alina in the corner. Genetic, accelerated by infection, most likely hidden for years. Without intervention, the slope will reach speech frequencies within 12 months. Lena traced the inked curve with 2 fingers, mapping gradients to the missing notes in her cassette. No tears. Fear, she discovered, was not a flood, but a desert wind. It dried the eyes, cracked the inside of the mouth, left no moisture for weeping. "How soon for surgery?" Alina asked, voice brittle. "In Prague, maybe experimental. Western clinics do cochlear implants, but—" The doctor's shrug completed the sentence. Hard currency, impossible visas, politics thicker than scar tissue. Outside, snowmelt dripped from hospital gutters in a rhythmic syncopation. Lena catalogued each droplet's pitch, committing them to an inner jukebox already packed with horn stabs, hi-hat ghosts. Michael's breath caught between phrases. Every new memory felt like a flask of air stashed for deep-sea diving. Petitions began. Alina wrote to ministries, embassies, charities still headquartered in Baroque villas, despite the economic frost. Responses arrived in envelopes stamped "Žádost zamítnuta," request denied, or not at all. One official suggested an arts for medicine barter. Lena could play piano at a propaganda gala in exchange for consideration. She declined gently. The piano was now a blurred constellation of overtones, each hammer strike truncated as if muffled under snow. To keep panic at bay, she invented drills, reciting the bass line of Billie Jean 10 times without error, tapping it first on wooden tabletop, then on quivering collarbone, finally on the inside of her wrist where pulse met rhythm. Some evenings, she lay on the apartment's radiators, face to iron, soaking up the furnace hum. Lower frequencies still faithful. She imagined them as pillars holding the roof of her perception. High notes were skylights. They might shatter, but the house could not fall so long as bass shook the floorboards. March ushered in a rumor of spring, and, with it, a letter postmarked München. The envelope smelled faintly of stale tobacco and newsroom ink. Inside, a polite German paragraph introduced Matthias Kruger, culture correspondent formerly of the Morgenblatt, now independent in capacity. He requested an interview to correct the record about Munich '88. A photocopy of the grainy arena photo was clipped to the margin, its edges worn from repeated handling. Alina read the letter thrice before sliding it across the kitchen table. Lena ran her fingertips over the raised toner, feeling rather than seeing the desperation etched between consonants. She imagined a man pacing beneath fluorescent ceiling panels, deadline red eyes fixed on a story nobody wanted printed. She admired stubborn harmonies, yet her answer was a soft refusal. I do not wish to become someone else's headline, she dictated while Alina typed. I already have a stage in my memory, and it is enough. The reply mailed, she expected quiet. Instead, Kruger appeared 10 days later, hunched inside a rain-slick parka at their entryway. He apologized for the intrusion, removed his shoes, produced pastries still warm from a railway kiosk. Over tea, he spoke carefully, describing audio dropouts in the official Munich broadcast, legal threats against small papers, and a janitor rumored to hold a missing letter. I can help you, he finished, eyes shining with conviction too raw for professional distance. Lena folded her hands. I am flattered, but help is surgery, not headlines. I may reach foundations, he countered, if people know you. She shook her head, feeling the room's acoustic boundaries blur as her threshold dipped another decibel. When stories walk without permission, they grow strange legs, she said. I can't chase them. I won't hear where they've gone. The phrase startled even her. It sounded final. Kruger left a business card embossed with his home number. Alina closed the door, forehead against wood, heartbeat loud. Lena inhaled the residual scent of train diesel on the man's coat, wondering which part of her refusal was caution and which part cowardice. Kruger, however, treated goodbyes as parentheses. Back in Munich, he phoned every name from the tour credits of '88. Most lines rang dead, one connected to Sam Bird Kelly, now gigging through Dutch jazz clubs. They met in a Rotterdam bar where trumpet valves rattled like railway joints. Sam listened, eyes narrowing. The blind girl. Hell yes, I remember. Michael hummed her story for weeks like a secret riff. Over cheap Pilsner, he recounted the letter, the frantic corridor, the assistant named Fields. Kruger's pen scratched faster. And the letter? Trash can job, Kelly said, sliding a coaster back and forth like a record fader. I saw it pitched. Thought about diving after, but show day eats your soul. Do you know where it went? Man, after loadout, nothing survives except cables and regrets. Kelly swigged foam, but guilt filmed his pupils. Kruger stood to leave, adrenaline buzzing. Someone kept it, he said, certain as prophecy. Paper doesn't sing, but it waits. Outside, the Maas River carried container barges toward the sea, hulls groaning a bass line Lena would still have recognized. The journalist imagined that note floating eastward, across cities and checkpoints, looking for ears before the silence sealed shut. April brought Lent, but Lena no longer trusted calendars. Her inner metronome skipped as though a tape head were dirty. She answered fewer phone calls. The handset hissed too loudly. One afternoon she clapped to test reverberation and realized the apartment had shrunk. Sound died inches from walls, its flourish truncated. She whispered goodnight to each song she'd memorized, turning them over like prayer beads. Smooth Criminal, Tuesday, Liberian Girl, Wednesday, Another Part of Me, Thursday, Routine, The Scaffold over the Abyss. Alina pushed on. She pawned her wedding brooch for an appointment with a Prague specialist, rumored to liaise with Western charities. They traveled overnight in a rattling bus that smelled of diesel and despair. At the clinic, they learned the liaison had emigrated weeks earlier. Files locked. Letters unanswered. Alina squeezed Lena's arm as though manual pressure could restore frequencies. The girl only nodded, having grown expert at disguising new voids. Yet small, defiant joys survived. A neighbor's toddler discovered drumming wooden spoons on pots. Lena sat on the stairwell steps, feeling the percussive thuds rise through concrete. She tapped along on her knees, mapping each pot size to a kick drum or floor tom. The child giggled, a chime Lena barely heard but could still feel in the air's tiny quiver. Vibrations became Morse code for persistence. One evening, the shoebox under her bed trembled in memory. Ticket stubs, newspaper scrap, the blurry photograph. She added fresh sheets of braille paper embossed with lyric fragments, her tactile songbook against oncoming dark. The final page held only 3 raised words. Find the letter. She pressed her thumb atop the dots, sealing promise into flesh. In Munich, Kruger filed expenses none of his editors approved, rail fares to factory towns, long-distance calls to Canadian numbers that rang into static. His wall map bloomed pushpins, janitor surnames from payroll ledgers, expats listed in church registries, freight manifests matching post-concert waste shipments. Colleagues joked he was chasing a ghost. One night, alone under a single desk lamp, he pinned a new card. Leonid Chernov, last known address, Montreal, and felt the board's lattice tighten like a snarehead ready to strike. Lena's hearing slipped another octave. She stood at the open window, catching tram vibrations in bone, not ear, and wondered whether remembering a song could ever equal hearing it. Fear rose, not of quiet, but of misremembering, of seeing Michael's choreographed spin in her mind yet playing it to the wrong tempo. What if her recollection bent like warped acetate? She closed her eyes, summoned the Munich roar, and set it against the hush of Brno at dusk. 2 soundscapes collided. Neither won. She breathed through the discord, sculpting it into something like prayer. Somewhere great wheels were turning, investigations, migrating letters, dormant sympathies. But on that balcony, only uncertain spring air moved. Lena tapped her fingers against the railing, matching heartbeats to a ghost beat nobody else could hear. The rhythm was flawed now, but it was hers, and until the last echo slipped away, she would keep time for both of them. The singer searching arenas, and the girl guarding a fading symphony inside fading ears. The snow outside Santa Ynez that January looked harmless at first, soft petals drifting across the pastures of Neverland Ranch. But by the time the Los Angeles Times hit Michael's breakfast tray, the world's temperature had fallen several more degrees. The headline did not bother with caution. New allegations against pop icon. Under it, a gallery of words, inappropriate, manipulation, grooming, rippled like black mold across newsprint. Michael skimmed the article once, twice, searching for some stray note of factual pitch. Everything rang off-key, yet he could not stop reading, as if each sentence were a backstage cue he had missed years earlier. The phone system, always busy near album cycles, choked on reporters' calls. Public relations staff erected walls of talking points. Ongoing investigation. Deeply hurt, confident truth will prevail. But every rebuttal echoed smaller than the accusation. By noon, shingles of paparazzi lenses glinted through the wrought iron gates. By dusk, tabloids on Fairfax were selling out 3 editions an hour. Far across the Atlantic, in an apartment block off Brno's Ksenova Street, Lena Novakova watched the same headlines scroll beneath a Czech television broadcast. The translation was blunt. Pedofili, Hvězda pod palbou. She heard almost nothing. Only the low thunder seeped through her implant when the broadcaster's consonants clipped hard. But she could read the grim geometry of their lips. Pedofili, falesh, zneužití, abuse, falsehood, lie. She was 19 now, shoulders broader from physiotherapy, hair cropped to reduce headaches brought on by cold metal and memory. Munich lived inside her like a bright stain that refused laundering but even bright stains can darken under long enough shadow. She pressed her palm to the CRT screen, following the anchor's mouth as he speculated about hush money, secret rooms, parents paid to forget. The captions trembled. Beneath them, a crawl promoted tomorrow's panel discussion. The end of an idyll. That night, sleep came fractured. Images stitched themselves from half-remembered footage. Michael lifting her past the barricade, reporters howling behind chain link, doctors threading electrodes into her cochlea. Was it possible the hand that steadied her shoulder belonged to a practiced deceiver? Maybe, a frightened corner of her mind whispered. Maybe the Munich moment was only good optics, another myth staged for foreign press. At breakfast, she flipped through the shoebox Matthias had couriered months earlier. Polaroid, hospital ledger, facsimile of Michael's lost note. You taught me to see with my eyes closed. The words vibrated under her fingertips, yet doubt still hissed. Proof, she reminded herself, is not antidote. It can outshout any document. 3 days into the media storm, a DHL van stopped outside her building. The driver lugged up a padded envelope bearing German stamps and Matthias's looping signature. Inside, a Hi8 video cassette, label typed Olympia Stadion München Rock and B Audio B. Lena borrowed an outdated deck from a neighbor and coaxed the whirring machine to life. The image jittered, shaky handheld, crowd roar shredding the tiny mic. But there he was, sequined jacket catching stage pyro, 14-year-old Lena in his arms, her white cane clattering against his boot as he settled her on the chair. The tape ran 22 minutes. 17 minutes in, during an unscripted lull before Bad, Camera B's mic caught something the broadcast mix had never carried. Michael bent down, lips near her ear, and the audio, thin but unmistakable, captured a whisper. I see you. Don't listen to the noise. The rest of the stadium howled, but those 8 words floated above the storm, preserved by accident on magnetic oxide for 5 years and a trans-European courier ride. Lena froze. The air in the living room thickened. Every motor rumble climbing through the floorboards fell silent. Doubt, so recently a loud predator, slunk away without argument. She rewound, played the phrase again, then a third time, until magnetic hiss threatened to blur the consonants. Each repetition struck like a mallet on bell bronze, ringing deeper layers of memory. The cigar smoke in backstage corridors, the cedar scent of his jacket lining, the tremor in his gloved fingertips that ruined the myth of untouchable superstardom. All of it had been real because this whisper was real, and it was addressed to her alone. When the tape clicked to its end, Lena sat motionless until streetlights winked on. Her mother found her there, elbows on knees, posture carved from deliberation. Maminko, Lena said, voice firm, I need envelopes, English dictionary, and every postage stamp we own. She drafted the letter, longhand, braille slate beside her to punch tactile versions for safety. No flowery preambles, no fan idolization, just the truth. Dear Michael, I am Lena, the girl you carried in Munich. Maybe you remember the vibrations, if not my name. They say terrible things about you today. I cannot judge what I did not witness, but I know the human being who whispered that the noise is not me. You told me not to listen to it. I ask you now to do the same. Because you once bent the rules for a stranger, I walk today and dance to rhythms only my bones can hear. Whatever courts decide, this is the verdict I carry in my chest. If you ever wonder whether that night mattered, It still matters every hour I breathe. She signed both ink and braille, folded the pages with ceremonial precision, and added a photograph from the shoebox. Her teenage silhouette rehearsing in the foggy gym, arms mid-arc. On the back, she wrote, "I found my stage." Addressing the envelope required research. MJ Productions, Encino Place-a-Name, California Zip, gleaned from a fan newsletter. Late that night, a January gale shoved snow against the shutters. Lena and her mother trudged through drifts to the 24-hour post box outside Hlavny Nádraží. The slot clanked shut with a metallic finality that felt like cymbals sealing a song. Walking home, Lena fought the instinct to question postal reliability, corporate screeners, chance itself. Delivery was no longer hers to control. She had pressed truth into fiber and ink, and trusted it to travel continents as faithfully as the vibrations that once tunneled through stadium concrete. In Santa Ynez, dusk laid purple stripes over the ranch. Michael sat in the screening room, audio muted on CNN as pundits dissected his facial tics. He lowered the remote, eyes glassy from too much brightness. Beside him, an assistant hovered, unsure whether to mention the growing stack of letters marked urgent. He set them on the armrest anyway, retreating before silence could turn volatile. Michael leafed through 3 envelopes: legal threats, brand withdrawals, pleas from strangers offering prayers at strategic price points, and finally closed his eyes. Somewhere, he felt certain, a chord waited that could cut through this cacophony. He just didn't know which postmark it would bear. That night, a Boeing cargo flight lifted from Prague, sacks of international mail buckled in its hold. Inside one pale envelope rode a letter not of absolution or accusation, but equilibrium. Proof that between floodlights and lawsuits, a single whispered sentence could travel 5 years and 2 surgeries to land exactly where it was always meant to land, if only the receiving heart could stay open long enough to hear it. Cloudless daylight bleached the cinder-block walls of Stage 27 at Sony Pictures, smearing every surface with the merciless fluorescence of a morgue. The band was already grinding through the brass vamp to scream, but Michael stood alone behind a flats panel, jacket half-buttoned, as though a hung jury waited on the other side of the scrim. A roadie handed him the headset mic. He turned it over once, twice, studying the scuffed metal like a compass that had forgotten north, then fitted it and stepped into the glare. From the front rail, the number looked flawless: snap turn, side glide, a razor-sharp freeze beneath a burst of CO2, but the mirrors mounted at house right betrayed the hesitations only he could see. Wrist flourish, trimmed a quarter-second early. Heel drop, a shade late, an echo of hidden drag. After the cutoff, he pivoted to musical director Brad Buxer. "Gimme that again," he said, hoarse. 1, 2, bridge." They repeated the entire passage 3 more times until the brass section's faces shone, then broke for 10. Michael drifted to the wings, towel over shoulders, breaths short. The rehearsal chatter receded beneath tinnitus' soft ringing, a phantom stadium roar he never entirely escaped. In that hush, he heard his own question surface, uninvited. "Where is the man who carried her?" The image, Munich floodlights, blind girl's cane glinting, flashed and retreated like a skipped film frame. Sound engineer B.J. Rack ambled over with a bottle of electrolyte water and the caution of a medic approaching a live wire. "Tempo's sitting good," he offered. "We're close." "Close isn't pulse," Michael replied, voice barely audible, eyes fixed somewhere above the rigging. B.J. nodded, understanding half, retreating before he could do harm. 4 miles away in the glass-walled lobby of MJ Productions, 3 mail tubs waited beside a security planter sprouting imitation bamboo. The receptionist flipped through padded envelopes, separating legal service threats from fan mail. Anything tagged. Emotional content. Review went to Floor 5, a suite nicknamed the Firewall, where publicists sifted pleas, manuscripts, and unvetted confessions. Ronnie Alvarez, junior communications clerk, hauled the tub into the suite's fluorescent trench. Walls there were lined with gray metal files, each drawer stenciled endorsements, photo ops, litigation hold. He donned latex gloves, policy since stalker powders, and sliced envelopes under a slow fan. Midway down the stack, check postmark, careful handwriting, return name L. Novakova. He felt the letter's weight. 2 sheets, maybe 3. He fed it through the document scanner as required, watched pixelated braille cells bloom on his monitor beside tidy English script. He managed 3 lines before the words stiffened his spine. Because you once bent the rules for a stranger, I walk today and dance to rhythms only my bones can hear. Ronnie's thumb hovered above delete. Protocol said archive, Class B, internal eyes only. Yet something in those sentences, plain, ungilded, cut through cubicle hum. He slipped the originals back into their envelope, stamped it, received, and set it on the outbound shelf labeled monitored, no direct response. Experience told him it would die there, shredded when the drawer filled, logged as handled. But protocol didn't forbid copies for risk review. He printed 1 duplicate, folded it into his planner beneath expense receipts, and told himself it was insurance against a moral hangover. After lunch, Michael holed up in a dressing room smaller than his ranch pantry, staring at a Polaroid taped inside the wardrobe door. Munich stage, sequins blurred, a girl's profile luminous. He kept it there the way divers keep prayer flags, reminder of surface air. The door cracked. Longtime aide Karen Fay slipped in, carrying fresh powder for touch-ups. "You're running ghost pale again," she murmured, smoothing a stray curl. "I feel transparent," he said, meeting her eyes in the grimy mirror. "Like they can project anything on me now." So project something back. He thought of answers, press conferences, primetime denials, but they felt like choreography without rhythm. "Somebody out there knows the original beat," he whispered instead. "I dropped it somewhere." Karen, ever the realist, dabbed foundation along his jaw. Songs don't vanish, they wait. She wanted to say more, but the stage manager banged the 5-minute call. She gave his shoulder one firm squeeze. "Solid matter, remember?" and exited. Michael took a final look at the Polaroid, then at his reflection. Eyes ringed, posture braced. A memory surfaced. Cold Dresden hallway, doctor's letterhead, with initials he'd funded anonymously. He exhaled. Maybe beats did wait. Evening deepened to indigo. Crew loaded road cases into semis rumbling like distant thunder. Up on floor 5, Ronnie lingered after his shift, fluorescent tubes buzzing as janitors vacuumed stale energy. He reread the check letter under desk lamp glow, each paragraph less stranger, more pulse. The final line snagged him. "If you ever wonder whether that night mattered, it still matters every hour I breathe." Ronnie slid the copy into a plain manila sleeve marked personal and tucked it behind a copy of the Crisis Management Handbook in his locker. "Some songs wait," he thought, echoing a phrase he'd overheard Michael tell the MD years ago. Maybe letters do, too. Down on stage 27, click track counted in, "They don't care about us." Michael launched into the first verse, punches crisp, but what lifted the hairs on every arm in the room was not technique. It was the half-smile that appeared when he hit the pre-chorus, as though an unseen metronome, long misplaced, had started blinking on the downbeats again. Nobody could know a letter addressed to him now sat entombed in a corporate file drawer, or that a single unauthorized copy had begun its quiet orbit through another set of corridors. But energy travels even when paper stalls. In the moment lights strobed crimson and drums detonated, Michael felt, not heard but felt, a faint backbeat aligning under his ribs, a reminder that somewhere beyond lawyers and lockouts, someone still danced in the dark to frequencies only bone can catch. And for the span of 4 minutes and 15 seconds, the sync returned. June 25, 2009. In Los Angeles, afternoon sun bent through hospital blinds and painted the linoleum an innocent gold. The color did not last. At 2:26 p.m. Pacific, a single ECG line straightened. Half an hour later, the first newsroom ticker spooled 4 words. Michael Jackson, pronounced dead. Those words coursed through fiber optic cables at the speed of light, crossing oceans, time zones, languages, until, 12,000 kilometers away, they flared crimson beneath the evening news logo of Czech television. Brno's summer heat had already driven windows wide. Lena sat at the kitchen table sorting pharmacy receipts, implant battery invoices, and grocery slips. The TV, usually background flicker, caught her gaze when the anchor leaned forward, voice pitched to the gravity reserved for presidential assassinations. Lena's auditory world was now a low-resolution topography. She felt emphasis more than heard diction, but the scrolling caption cut through any deficiency. Pop legend dies at 50. She rose, steady yet hollow, and walked toward the set as though warmth radiated from it. The presenter's lips formed syllables she decoded without sound. Cardiac arrest, paramedics, king of pop. A smaller window showed aerial footage of ambulances clustering outside UCLA Medical Center, emergency lights pulsing an indifferent disco against concrete. Beneath the images rolled archival clips, moonwalks, stadiums, Oprah's couch, and a million camera flashes that for once looked funereal. Alina entered, tote of laundry over one arm, caught the screen, then her daughter's expression. She registered the headline, felt gravity shift, and closed the door so the corridor would not witness their private meteor strike. "Lenushko?" she ventured. No answer. Lena's imperative plant registered only the sub-bass hum of the refrigerator and the damp throb of her own pulse. She crossed to her room, a space kept spare to appease migraine auras. At the wardrobe top shelf lived the shoebox, Polaroid, 2 Braille transcriptions, Dresden discharge report, VHS cassette, now digitized but kept out of sentiment. On top sat the unsent envelope. Her letter to him returned months earlier with addressee unknown, stamped in red across the Czech postage. Beneath it, the Munich photo, incandescent confetti of sequins haloing the 14-year-old girl she once was. She gathered both objects, each suddenly heavier than wood or paper should be, and sank to the floorboards. Silence expanded, thick as ash after fireworks. She laid the photograph on her knees. With the other hand, she traced the blind girl's outline, recalling tactile memories the camera could never capture. The flex of his forearm, the micro-quake in his breathing just before he set her down. She wanted to summon a song, any song, but the implant offered only static. Grief short-circuited its gain, so she pressed her palm to the oak planks, waiting for a tram to rattle by, for a neighbor to close a door, for any vibration to fill the vacuum. Nothing. Even the city seemed to hold its breath. Minutes, perhaps an hour, slid past in soundless tide. When Alina finally risked entry, Lena did not look up. Tears glistened, yet never spilled. They seemed to crystallize before falling, as if gravity itself respected her muteness. Alina knelt, unsure whether to speak. Words had weight. The room could not take more weight. Instead, she eased an arm around her daughter's shoulders. The gesture delivered one heartbeat from mother to child. A low drum Lena felt like distant timpani. Still, she did not weep. The sorrow was too subterranean for surface rituals. On the opposite side of the Atlantic, dusk folded New York City into neon mourning. In a walk-up apartment lined with cardboard manuscript boxes, Matthias Kruger, now 51, and threadbare from chasing impossibilities, silenced his police band radio, which had spent the afternoon confirming facts no fan wanted true, and stared at the half-finished book outline on his desk. Footnotes, interview timestamps, legal release forms. Suddenly, they felt trivial, anemic beside the news crawl glowing in the corner of his monitor. He considered that the story might end here, its protagonists forever out of phase. One heart stilled, one letter unanswered. The phone rang. Landline, a rarity. "Mr. Kruger?" The woman's voice carried West Coast cadence, tempered by corporate caution. "You don't know me. I worked mailroom at MJ Productions." Her breath caught, as though confessing treason. "Years ago, I kept a copy of a letter. It's time the right people read it." Kruger's pencil stilled. "Why now?" "Because truth shouldn't be buried with its subject," she said. "And because a girl in your book deserves to know it wasn't lost." A fax tone squealed. Pages spilled out. Lena's handwriting. Crisp scan of Braille dots. The photograph of her gymnasium dance. At the bottom, in margin, Ronnie's scrawl. "Never delivered. I'm sorry." Kruger felt a tremor run through the floor, unlikely in Manhattan concrete. He realized it was his own pulse, a bodily seismograph, finally registering the aftershock of a narrative unresolved for 2 decades. He dialed an international number he still knew by muscle memory. It rang long. European networks were choked with obituary chatter. At last, Alina answered, voice colorless. "I must speak with Lena," he said. "I have something that belongs to her." Alina hesitated. From the other room, Lena lifted her head. The faint vibration of the telephone bell reached her through planks and bloodstream. She stood, letter clutched, photo pressed to chest, and moved toward that tiny quiver of life. Sound might have deserted her, but rhythm, elemental, patient, had not, and it guided her across the threshold toward whatever coda remained. Outside, Brno's street lamps switched on in staggered sequence, casting pulses of light along the wet asphalt. A distant car stereo bled the opening riff of Man in the Mirror, bass line crawling through summer air. Lena could not hear it, yet she paused, sensing movement in the molecules around her. The rhythm lived, muted, mangled, but alive. And in that imperceptible tremor, she found the next breath and the next, as the world prepared to mourn in frequencies she could no longer catch, but would forever understand. A light November drizzle dusted Prague's Malá like sifted sugar, glinting across cobblestones that had carried centuries of haste and hesitation. Inside the Baroque refectory of Strahov Monastery, however, the air felt charged, not with weather, but with the low, anticipatory hum that precedes revelation. Rows of walnut chairs faced a small dais, framed by shelves of illuminated manuscripts. The spines of medieval psalters and 20th-century memoirs waited side by side, as though history itself had come to audit the evening's testimony. At precisely 7, the double doors parted. Journalists, academics, and a sprinkling of cautiously curious fans filed in, clutching invitations stamped "The Girl He Carried, Launch and Discussion." They moved with the politeness of people entering a sanctuary, speaking in library hush. At the far edge of the front row sat a woman in her late 40s, posture straight, palms resting atop a sleek ebony cane whose titanium tip tapped once against the floorboards, claiming presence. Her hair, now silver-threaded, was pulled back to expose the discreet processor of a vibrotactile implant behind her right ear. No badge, no entourage, just stillness, as if she had been carved from the hush. Few recognized Lena Novakova, and that was how the organizers intended it. The publisher had offered VIP placement, even a brief statement. Lena declined both. "Truth speaks loud enough without my face on a poster," she had written in reply. A sentence that now lived on the editor's office wall, steady as a metronome. The house lights dimmed. At center stage, Matthias Kruger, hair thinned to frost, shoulders slightly stooped, stepped to the lectern. His manuscript, 600 pages bound in cobalt cloth, lay beside a single glass of water and a fountain pen borrowed from the Abbey scriptorium for symbolic flourish. He scanned the audience, found Lena, allowed himself the smallest nod, and began. "Good evening. This book is not a sensation," he said, check delivered with a German cadence softened by 3 decades of adopted city life. "It is a composite echo. Tonight, we follow that echo to its origin." The room exhaled as one. Tape recorders clicked into readiness. Kruger unfolded the tale, a blind girl from communist Czechoslovakia lifted on stage by a superstar. The missing letter photographed and lost. The covert surgery funded beneath layers of alias. The silence that followed. And finally, the documents that refused to stay buried. As he spoke, an archivist in the wings advanced slides onto a modest screen, box camera stills of Munich's floodlights. A ledger line reading LM, disbursement, Tunhawanoneinbao, the Polaroid of a sequined glove supporting a child who could not see the dazzle she embodied. The audience remained seated, but leaned forward collectively, like wheat following wind. Journalists scribbled, historians whispered citations. Throughout, Lena's expression stayed calm, but those nearest her sensed micro-adjustments, fingers tightening on the cane during the description of Dresden, shoulders easing when Kruger recounted the whispered benediction captured on raw, cam audio. She did not speak. She listened, not to frequencies, much of the spoken range eluded her, but to cadences felt through chair legs, air currents, her own chest cavity. The story vibrated. That was enough. Mid-lecture, Kruger paused. "Some names will remain unrevealed," he said, voice dipped in respect. One in particular asked never to eclipse the subject whose courage dwarfed her circumstance. A murmur rustled the hall, rumor thwarted, headline denied. Cameras panned, hoping for focal drama. None arrived. Lena stayed anonymous by collective agreement and personal request. Yet when Kruger read Michael's original note, reproduced on the book's final page, the hall rose in tribute. Publishers, monks in white habits, students with earbuds peeking from scarves. Hundreds of feet scuffed faint rhythms into the timber floor. Lena alone remained seated. Instead, she raised her right hand, palm outward, an unspoken, "I am here," and let her other palm drift to the boards, receiving the resonance of their standing ovation. She closed her eyes. Behind lids she saw nothing, yet perceived everything. Gratitude rolling like distant thunder she could feel, if not quite hear. When the applause settled, Kruger uncapped the glass pen and signed the ceremonial first edition. He handed it to Father Pavel, the monastery librarian, who placed it in a display case between a 15th-century hymn book and a 1968 Samizdat poetry cycle, evidence that miracles sometimes prefer parchment to pulp. Reception followed in the cloister arcade, but Lena slipped away before trays of sparkling wine arrived. Her exit went unnoticed amid the soft crush of intellectual congratulations. Outside, the rain had stopped. Fog braided itself through sodium lamps, muting the city to a watercolor glow. She descended the long stairway toward Uyezd, Cain finding the rhythm of each worn step. Halfway down, laughter, young, bright, floated from an open doorway where a girl no older than Lena had been in 1988, leaned against a stone balustrade, clutching a cheap Bluetooth speaker. The thin device leaked an unmistakable groove, syncopated hi-hat, bass glide, snap-clap on the 4. Man in the mirror, low bitrate, but alive. Lena's implant registered a faint buzz. More importantly, the granite beneath her shoes ticked gently with the kick drum. She paused. The girl noticed her, smiled the shy recognition shared by all who find themselves alone with music in public space. Lena returned the smile, small but luminous. She could not hear the lyric, but she mouthed the first line all the same. "I'm gonna make a change," allowing the memory of Michael's whisper to supply melody. The girl lifted an eyebrow, impressed. "Nice," she said in English, unaware her audience perceived only vibration and memory. Lena tapped 2 fingers against her own heart. Rhythm lives here, then resumed her descent. At the foot of the stairs she glanced back once. The girl had resumed dancing, oblivious star against fog-washed lamplight. Lena continued along Campa Island's canal, cobbles drumming underfoot in gentle swing time. In her tote slept a freshly signed copy of The Girl He Carried. She had not needed to read her name inside to know it was there. Sometimes presence is proven by the spaces we decline to occupy. Wind off the Vltava ruffled riverside poplars, sending a shiver through iron railings that traveled up her cane into bone, the city applauding with subtle percussion. She felt the cadence settle, steady, unbroken. Somewhere in the hush, she imagined Michael's final line from the letter she had only touched once in facsimile. "When every ear falls silent, the heart will still hear." She let that sentence pulse alongside the muted river, guiding her steps deeper into Prague's narrow veins until even fog could not separate her from the rhythm that had carried her across decades of noise and doubt. Behind her, on a barred library shelf, an open book cooled beneath archival lights. Its last page displayed a facsimile in blue ink. "Thank you for teaching me to see. Maybe when every ear is deaf, only the heart will remain, and it hears better." Beneath, the curator had included a footnote. "Original letter recovered, sender unknown." Visitors would read, would nod, might cry. But the one person who needed the line most had already etched it onto the drum skin of her silence, where it beat on, soft, unwavering, indestructible.